Once there was a boy. His name was Mahirwe, which means chance. When Chance was a baby, war arrived in his country, and so his family had to flee their home. The war followed them all the way to their new country, and so Chance's family abandoned him because they couldn't look after him anymore. Now, he was picked up by a kind man who raised him. War had become the norm in this area, so at a very early age, Chance joined the army. He was unlucky and lost both of his arms in the fighting. After some reflection, he decided to go back to his native country to seek out his family, for he heard the war was over there and there was peace. Chance did find his family, but when he did, he had grown so much that they didn't recognize him anymore. When they heard his story, they were suspicious, but they let him in anyways. Now, Chance's real mother had long since passed away, and his stepmother disliked him because he ate too much food. So one night, when Chance was sleeping, she snuck into his room, picked him up, carried him outside, and threw him in a river. In the river, Chance was swallowed by an enormous fish. The fish swam all the way across the world and spat the boy up in America. Upon reaching the shore, Chance discovered that he magically had arms again. He met a rich boss man who taught him how to fly a plane and then gave him the plane. Chance flew this plane all the way back to his native country to visit, and when his family saw him, rich, able-bodied, and flying a plane, they were astonished. "Chance is a magician!" they exclaimed. "No," he replied, "but all the harm you wished on me has turned instead into happiness. Here I am today. I have 2 arms, I work, and I have my own plane." Of course, none of that is true. Chance was not born in a country where war broke out. Chance was born between the wide-ruled lines of a sheet of notebook paper in the pencil strokes of a 17-year-old boy named Eric, who was sat in a bunk bed in a rehabilitation center for child soldiers. It was Eric who was born here in Rwanda, where war broke out when he was young, and Eric who lost his family in the Congo, and Eric who joined the fighting at a young age. But unlike his creation, Eric still had his hands and his arms which he had used to flag down UN peacekeepers as he sprinted towards their rescue plane, hands which he used 2 months later to create Chance between the wide-ruled lines of a sheet of notebook paper. Now, Chance's family had been right about one thing. Chance was magic. Not only because he could regrow lost limbs, but because he could lose them in the first place. As an imaginary character, Chance had the ability to reveal the invisible. A broken heart, a destroyed sense of self-worth, the fear of being useless or burdensome. All of these things could be seen in a limbless boy who arrived unexpected and ate too much. Chance could be thrown in a river more easily than Eric could voice his complex feelings about his own family who had abandoned him. Chance could come home with his injuries physically displayed more simply than a string of accounts about being drugged, enslaved, beaten, and forced to fight. And Chance could go to a foreign land, regrow his arms, and be given a plane with more audacity than Eric could stand up and tell his countrymen, "I don't need you to accept me. I can stand on my own 2 feet. In fact, I can fly." Chance offered Eric the safety of a transposed self, the richness of a poetic reality, and the redemptive possibility of total recovery. Now, it was this last thing that grabbed my attention as I sat and I listened to Eric tell his story. It was during my 4th rehearsal with the demobilized boys. You see, I had traveled around the world listening to soldiers' stories. And a lot of these accounts were literal. They were stuck traumas that the men would tell and retell. The pit I dug to bury my enemy in cement. The cell where they tortured me. Hearing these stories again and again, it was like the men were shedding a small piece of their past with each telling. Change was occurring, but it was the slow, limping healing of a lifelong injury, and not the mythic transformation of a poetic rebirth. And then Eric told his story. It was the exact story I realized I had been looking for all year. Somehow, this 17-year-old boy intuitively had hit upon my unspoken question and its answer. What is the moment of total healing, of hope, in all of these painful histories? Chance reminded me that hope must be sought in the realm of myth and magic, where severed arms can regrow and salvation can be found by riding in the guts of a fish. So I knew from the moment that we heard Eric's story that it was very important that we stage it exactly as he created it. So my team set to work making this happen. Clémence and Emily, my collaborators, built an enormous 5-person fish puppet out of discarded plastic bottles. Peter, our translator, changed our arty English suggestions into firm Kenya-Rwanda directives, and he rallied the cast of 40 boys into some impressive physical theater. But as Chance and his story began to take shape in the real world and its real interests invaded Chance's world in turn. Over the next 3 weeks, under the watchful eye of the Demobilization Commissioner, who insisted that the piece be more educational, Chance's adventure went from an epic journey across the world in the belly of a magical beast to a gentle swim across Lake Gisenyi in the belly of a fish named MONUC, an acronym not so subtly shared by the UN mission in the Congo. When it was insisted that Chance have a change of heart at the end, embracing the family that abandoned him and shouting, "Long live the Demobilization Commission!" my heart sank. Where was the audacity? Where was the boy flying off into the sunset solo in his own plane? It was Peter who brought me back to earth. These boys don't need anyone, he told me. Not you, not the commission. This is a game compared with what they've been through. And he was right. They were more than happy to indulge the commissioner and change the script, just like they had been more than happy to indulge us and make some theater. And anyways, any artistic dignity that we were worried about losing in the changed ending was overshadowed by the very real dignity of the boys taking the stage and fielding questions to a crowd of 400 awestruck Rwandan socialites. Only so little of that is true either. Eric was not somebody who escaped in a MONUC plane. That story belonged to Olivier, a small boy who loved drumming. Eric never talked about being drugged. That was Jean-Paul's story. And Eric wasn't even called Eric. All the boys' names had been changed for their safety, as had Clémence's and Emily's and Peter's. The only name that belonged to anyone was Chance, and Chance was a fictional character, and I had betrayed him. Because I wasn't anywhere near as protective of his story as I made myself out to be. I was secretly very embarrassed by the whole Salvation in America ending, and so I was actually a little bit relieved that that bit had been changed, if I'm honest. So there I am, sat in my warm, carpeted room in London, drafting my TEDx talk, knowing that I've burned through 9 of my precious 12 TED Talk minutes. And I'm still nowhere near closer to righting this wrong, to undoing an injustice inflicted on a fictional character during a slap slapdash production with a spirited group of boys in Kigali in the spring of 2012. And it is important to me, because Chance is my hero. Because I wish I could do what he somehow did, what all the boys did. Magic myself whole again. You see, I lost an arm too, sometime in that year. I mean, who hasn't, right? It's just that when I lost mine, it was in the middle of this year when I had to stage all these stories of soldiers losing their arms. And I didn't want anyone thinking that I was suggesting that my silly story was anything like theirs. So I just kept it hidden, covered. Through the next 2 years of work through Israel and Lebanon and Kashmir and right back to London, where I was sat at my computer disappointing myself with drafts of my TEDx talk. I looked up from my computer at the poster from our production in Rwanda, which was tacked to my bedroom wall, and I noticed it was dripping. The design, a drawing of a great fish, began to wriggle and move across the page. It spun around, and the jaws of the giant fish opened, and inside stood a Rwandan boy, his arms fully outstretched. Chance jumped out of the fish's mouth and onto my carpeted floor. For a moment, we just stood there. Finally, I spoke. "What do you want?" I demanded. Chance looked at me. "You sought me out, remember? You brought me here. You're writing this TEDx talk. What do you want?" I wanted my arm back. But I wasn't going to say that out loud. Chance must have seen it in my eyes, because very gently he said to me, "Your fish will come." And because he was an imaginary character in a made-up world, I found the audacity to believe him that it might. But then I was suddenly ashamed. "This wasn't supposed to be about me," I said to him. What I wanted to stage Eric's story exactly as he created it. To tell it, to do justice to him, to all of the boys, and to you. Chance smiled. A small smile that started as a twitch in the corner of his mouth and spread across his face until it exploded into laughter. "You do me justice," he said. "It is the stories that do justice to the storytellers, not the other way around. Never the other way around." And with that, he stepped back into the mouth of the fish. The fish's jaws clacked shut around him, and the fish spun around, swimming all the way until it reached America. Upon reaching the shore, Chance met a rich boss man who bought him a plane and taught him how to fly it. He got in that plane and he went back to visit his homeland, and when his family saw him, they were astonished. "Chance is a magician," they exclaimed. "No," he replied, "but all the harm that you wished on me has turned instead into happiness. Here I am today. I have 2 arms, I work, and I have my own plane." And after saying that, he embraced them all, and he flew back to America, flying solo in his very own plane. And whether or not any of that ever actually happened, every word of that story is true.